In the cold silence of the White Mountain, there is a stretch of road where time feels frozen because one night, a young woman stepped out of her wrecked car and walked into the darkness, never to be seen again. No footprints, no screams, no clues. Just a vanished life and a mystery so unnerving that investigators still whisper about it decades later. Tonight, we return to the place where the world last saw Maura Murray and to the chilling question that haunts America. How does a person disappear into thin air? The night was colder than usual for early February in New Hampshire, the kind of cold that turns the air sharp and makes every small sound feel amplified in the stillness of the mountain. On that isolated road, carved between dark pines and snowbanks taller than a person, a single car traced its final known path, a black Saturn belonging to Maura Murray. She was a nursing student with a bright future and a private life more complex than anyone truly understood. Hours earlier, she had packed her belongings with an unexplained urgency, left campus without telling friends, and headed north as if trying to escape something no one else could see. Her phone records showed no panic, no outbursts, just an unsettling quiet that contrasted sharply with the chaos unraveling beneath the surface of her life. When her car was found crashed along Route 112, the scene was strangely serene, almost too clean for an accident on a frozen mountain road. The airbags deployed, the damage minimal, and a witness later recalled how Maura seemed oddly composed, even soft-spoken, insisting no one needed to call the police. She said someone was already on the way, despite phone records proving she hadn't contacted anyone. Minutes later, when a passing school bus driver offered help, she repeated the same calm dismissal. These brief exchanges became the last confirmed glimpses of her moments that feel chilling in hindsight, because of how normal, how controlled, how eerily steady she appeared. Less than 10 minutes after that final conversation, the police arrived to find an empty vehicle with the engine cooling, the doors locked, and no sign of the driver. There were no footprints leading into the woods, no direct mark, no discarded belongings, just a sudden void where a young woman had been standing moments earlier. Search dogs later detected her scent only briefly before losing it in the middle of the road, as if she had stepped into another vehicle or vanished into thin air. For officers on scene, the silence felt wrong, like the forest itself was hiding what had happened on that desolate stretch of highway. Investigators began piecing together her final days and discovered details that raised more questions than answered. A sudden emotional breakdown at her job days prior, cryptic online searches about getaway cabin, and an unexplained phone call that seemed to rattle her deeply. Her family insisted she wasn't suicidal, wasn't planning to disappear, wasn't the type to abandon everything she knew. Yet her actions painted a picture of someone carrying a weight she wasn't sharing with anyone, someone moving with urgency toward a destination she never revealed. Theories swirled with time. Some believed she staged her disappearance, starting a new life far from the pressures she faced. Others argued she encountered a predator that night, accepting a ride that turned deadly. Another haunting possibility suggested she wandered into the woods in a disoriented state, succumbing to the brutal cold in a place so remote her body would be nearly impossible to find. Each explanation carries its own darkness, its own level of tragedy, yet none have produced evidence strong enough to anchor the truth. The White Mountains surrounding the crash site are vast and unforgiving, an expanse of dense forest, abandoned trails, and rugged terrain capable of swallowing a life whole. Even with helicopters, heat-seeking equipment, and hundreds of volunteers combing every direction, nothing surfaced. The absence of evidence became the case's defining feature, a void as chilling as the winter air that night. It is this impossible emptiness that makes her disappearance one of the most confounding in American history. Today, Route 112 remains a quiet, almost eerie reminder of the unanswered question that still grips investigators and the public alike. Her family returned to after year, hoping the land will finally give up its secret, but the cold wind moves through the trees offering no answers, no closure. Time passes, theories evolve, but the truth remains locked somewhere between her last words at the roadside and the silent moment she stepped into the darkness. Whatever happened to Maura Murray continues to haunt the country, a mystery suspended in the frozen air of a night that refused to fade. On a quiet Christmas night in Boulder, Colorado, inside a home filled with decorations, gifts, and soft holiday lights, something unthinkable happened. A 6-year-old beauty queen was found dead in the basement of her own house while the rest of the world still slept. No forced entry, no signs of a break-in, just a family, a ransom note, and a crime scene that looked more like a puzzle than a tragedy. Tonight, we revisit the case that America cannot stop debating, the haunting death of JonBenét Ramsey. The Ramsey house was still wrapped in holiday warmth, when the morning began with a scream that has echoed through American true crime history. Patsy Ramsey stood at the top of the staircase clutching a 3-page ransom note written in strangely theatrical language, claiming her daughter had been taken for a very specific ransom amount that happened to match John Ramsey's recent bonus. The note demanded silence, threatened execution, and looked like it was written by someone who knew the family intimately, yet its style was so exaggerated it felt almost a script. Police arrived quickly, but what waited inside the house was a perfect storm of confusion, panic, and crucial mistakes that would shape the case forever. Instead of securing the home, officers allowed friends, neighbors, and even church members to walk freely through rooms, touch surfaces, and gather in the kitchen. Christmas decorations rustled as people moved, cups were filled with coffee, and conversations covered the sound of evidence being unknowingly destroyed. In the basement, where JonBenét would later be found, shadows sat heavy, untouched, as if holding their breath. Every detail of that morning seemed to cloud rather than clarify what had happened during the night. The chaos felt unnatural for a crime scene, almost as if the crime itself resisted being understood. Hours passed with no sign of an intruder, no phone call from the supposed kidnapper, and no clue leading investigators toward a ransom exchange. Then, in a moment that changed the entire trajectory of the investigation, an officer instructed John Ramsey to search the house again. Within minutes, he descended into the small basement room and found his daughter lying there on the cold floor, covered in a blanket, her wrists bound, tape over her mouth, and a cord around her neck. His screams echoed through the house, sending a shockwave of grief that contrasted violently with the stillness of the crime scene. But when he carried her body upstairs out of fear, instinct, or desperation, any remaining evidence was compromised. Fibers mingled, prints overlapped, and key details that could have revealed the truth were lost forever. The investigation splintered almost immediately. Half the country believed the family knew more than they claimed. The other half suspected an intruder who slipped silently into the house on Christmas night to commit an unspeakable act. The case became a national obsession, not because of clear evidence, but because of the overwhelming absence of it. As detectives interviewed the parents, the ransom note became the centerpiece of suspicion. It was bizarrely long for a kidnapping message, written on the family's own stationery, and filled with references that sounded cinematic rather than criminal. Handwriting experts argued endlessly, but nothing reached the standard needed for certainty. Meanwhile, the layout of the basement, with its maze-like structure and strange window access, fueled theories that a stranger could have entered unnoticed, hiding in the crawl spaces beneath the house. Every scenario seemed plausible, yet none fit perfectly. Years turned into decades, and the case matured into a cultural mystery, one that lives in documentary, books, talk shows, and internet forums where people still dissect every blurred detail. DNA testing offered temporary hope when unknown male DNA fragments were found on JonBenét's clothing, but they were later considered inconclusive and possibly contaminated. Each new lead collapsed under scrutiny, and every explanation contradicted another. The crime refused to fit into a single narrative, twisting itself into a haunting riddle that kept America divided. Today, the Ramsey home stands as a symbol of unanswered question, a place where Christmas lights once glowed warmly against the snow while a tragedy unfolded within its walls. The case remains a wound in American true crime history, not only because of the brutality of what happened, but because the truth slipped away during the very hours it mattered most. Somewhere between the ransom note, the contaminated rooms, and the silent basement, the answers remain buried, leaving the world to wonder who killed JonBenét Ramsey and why this mystery still holds America in its grip. He wrote in codes no one could crack. He hunted strangers at random, and he taunted police with letters so cold and deliberate that they still chill the spine decades later. In the late 1960s, California lived in fear of a killer who seemed to be playing a game where he made the rules, controlled the panic, and vanished before anyone could catch him. Tonight, we return to the shadow of one of America's most infamous ghosts, the Zodiac. California in the late 1960s was a place buzzing with cultural revolution, freedom, and restless energy. But beneath the surface, a darker current was beginning to spread. It arrived quietly at first, disguised as a series of brutal attacks on couples parked in secluded locations, each incident more calculated than the last. The attacker moved with chilling composure, targeting victims without any obvious connection, striking swiftly and disappearing into the night. His crimes were not impulsive. They were orchestrated as if he were testing the boundaries of fear itself. Then the letters began to arrive, and California realized it wasn't facing just a killer, it was facing a tormentor who wanted the world to watch. The letters marked a turning point, transforming isolated acts of violence into a spectacle of terror. Written in precise handwriting, they were filled with arrogant threats and a disturbing fascination with control. Alongside them came the cryptogram's complex codes that seemed to mock investigators, dangling the promise of identity just out of reach. Newspapers published them under the threat of further killings, and suddenly the Zodiac had the entire country in the palm of his hand. People across America gathered around kitchen tables, trying to decipher the symbols, hoping the key to stopping him lay hidden in the pattern. When a married couple solved the first major cipher, the message revealed a glimpse into the psyche. He spoke of collecting slaves for the afterlife, hunting for pleasure, and enjoying the fear he created. But his identity remained concealed, buried beneath symbols that even modern cryptographers still struggle to interpret. The precision of his language suggested education, intelligence, and planning. Yet his crimes were chaotic, brutal, and intimate. This contradiction became the signature of the Zodiac, a man who lived somewhere between order and madness, logic and violence. As the attacks continued, the killer evolved, changing locations, weapons, and patterns to evade detection. One moment he was shooting couples, the next he was stabbing them, and later he would threaten to execute schoolchildren simply to keep his name in the headline. His ability to reinvent himself suggested deep understanding of public psychology. He wasn't just killing, he was performing. Every letter, every phone call, every coded message was designed to maintain power over an entire population, and the media played directly into his hands. Investigators pored over thousands of tips, suspects, and leads, each one seeming promising until it fell apart under scrutiny. Arthur Lee Allen, the most infamous suspect, had disturbing similarity to the Zodiac's profile, yet nothing legally binding placed him at the scene. Other suspects emerged with compelling circumstantial links, but none carried the definitive evidence needed to end the mystery. Witness descriptions were inconsistent, handwriting analyses contradicted each other, and fingerprint comparisons failed to produce a match. The Zodiac seemed to have constructed his crimes with the intention of outliving investigation. And as abruptly as he appeared, he faded. No one knows if he died, moved, or simply stopped killing. Some believe he continued under a different alias, connected to other unsolved murders across the West Coast. Others argue he was a man who needed attention more than violence, retreating once the world stopped feeding his ego. His final confirmed letter brought no answers, only more uncertainty. The silence that followed has lasted for decades, leaving an unsettling void where closure should have been. Today, the Zodiac case stands as one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries, a chilling reminder of how a single predator manipulated fear on a national scale. His ciphers remain partially undeciphered, his identity hidden behind masks he crafted with letters and violence. The victims' families still wait for justice, and investigators both professional and amateur continue digging through symbols, hoping one final clue will break the case open. But until that moment comes, the Zodiac's shadow lingers over history, a ghostly figure who wrote his own legend into the heart in fear and walked away without leaving a trace. Some disappearances leave debris, some leave distress calls, radar trails, or desperate last words. But one winter night above Lake Michigan, an aircraft simply vanished. No explosion, no wreckage, no signal. Just a blip on a radar screen that blinked once then disappeared forever. Tonight, we revisit the flight that seemed to fall not from the sky, but out of existence itself. The flight that departed that cold evening looked routine in every sense, a small, sturdy aircraft piloted by an experienced aviator who had traveled the route countless times before. The weather, contrary to later rumors, was largely stable. Visibility was clear, radio contact steady, and nothing suggested the journey would be different from any other trip across the Great Lakes. Yet, as the plane approached the broad, steel-colored expanse of Lake Michigan, something shifted. A momentary disturbance flickered across the radar, almost too fast to register, like a skipped heartbeat in the rhythm of the machine. Then, without warning, the signal vanished entirely. Air traffic controllers tried to re-establish contact, calling out repeatedly into the static. No distress call returned, no mayday, no sign of mechanical failure. Flights in the same corridor reported nothing unusual, no sudden weather anomaly, no bright flashes, no turbulence strong enough to explain such an abrupt disappearance. It was as if the aircraft slipped through a crack in reality, leaving nothing behind. The Coast Guard mobilized instantly, confident the plane must have hit the water, but what they found or failed to find only deepened the mystery. Search crews swept the lake from every angle, combing the icy water with sonar, divers, helicopters, and boats, but Lake Michigan remained unbroken and eerily still. No floating debris, no fuel slick, no shattered glass or metal fragments rising to the surface. The absence of wreckage was almost more alarming than a crash itself. Even the smallest impact should have produced evidence, yet the lake offered none. It was as though the aircraft had been plucked from the sky before it ever reached the water. Investigators began exploring every possible explanation, starting with mechanical failure. But the aircraft model, known for its reliability, offered no pattern of catastrophic malfunction that matched the sudden loss of radar contact. Weather analysis ruled out lightning strikes or microbursts. The pilot's training record was immaculate, with no history of risky behavior or health issues that might lead to a fatal lapse. Each avenue collapsed under the weight of missing evidence, leaving experts with a puzzle missing its center. In time, more unconventional theories surfaced. Some believed the plane suffered an electrical failure so sudden it prevented a distress call, though that still didn't explain the lack of debris. Others pointed to rare atmospheric phenomena, including sudden downdrafts or localized pockets of violent turbulence that could drag an aircraft down silently. A minority speculated that Lake Michigan's notorious Michigan Triangle, often compared to the Bermuda Triangle, might have played a role, referencing other historical disappearances in the same region. Every theory carried its own unsettling logic, yet none accounted for the complete erasure of the aircraft. Families of the passengers clung to any possibility of understanding what happened during those final moments. They reviewed flight logs, questioned officials, and pushed for extended searches long after authorities scaled back operation. Some found solace in the idea of a quick, unexpected end. Others were haunted by the thought of the unknown, convinced something more unnatural or undiscovered must have taken place. The lake became both a grave and a question, holding its silence beneath the shifting waves that concealed whatever truth lay at the bottom. Today, decades later, the disappearance remains one of the strangest aviation mysteries in American history. The radar blip that vanished without explanation stands as the last trace of a flight that should have been ordinary, but instead slipped into legend. Lake Michigan continues to carry the weight of that unanswered question. How can an aircraft with experience under the controls, flying through calm skies, disappear so cleanly that it leaves not even a single piece behind? Until a discovery is made or the lake gives up its secret, the mystery endures. A chilling reminder of how vast the sky is and how little we sometimes understand about what moves through it. She washed ashore without a name. No ID, no missing person match, no family searching for her. Just a silent teenager found on the edge of Somerton Beach, her body untouched by violence, but surrounded by clues that made no sense. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why did no one step forward to claim her? Tonight, we unravel a mystery that still unsettles investigators across America, the girl who arrived from nowhere and vanished into history. The morning light revealed her first, a young girl lying on the sand as if she had simply fallen asleep beside the waves. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints leading to or from her body, and no clear indicator of how she ended up alone on a coastline far from any known home. Her clothes were plain but clean, her skin showed no markings of abuse, and her expression, frozen in stillness, looked strangely peaceful. Yet beneath that calm exterior was a puzzle that investigators would spend years trying to solve. She fit the description of no missing person on record, and her discovery raised more questions than answers. Authorities began with the basics: fingerprints, dental comparisons, facial reconstruction, but each attempt faded into silence. No school reported her absence, no hospitals recognized her, no family across the country stepped forward claiming a daughter, niece, or sister. The lack of identification created a void that investigators found deeply unsettling, particularly because it suggested a life so disconnected that no one noticed she was gone. For a teenager, that level of isolation felt almost impossible, and yet her case embodied exactly that kind of haunting emptiness. Her belongings added a layer of strangeness. A small backpack was found nearby, containing only a few personal items: a hairbrush, a single change of clothes, and a folded note with words smudged beyond recognition. Nothing inside the bag revealed where she lived, who she was, or what brought her to the beach. Investigators wondered whether she had run away, been trafficked, or escaped something unspeakable. Every theory felt plausible, yet every path dissolved into dead ends. It was as if she had been severed from the world before ever stepping onto that sand. Witness interviews offered fragmented clues. A couple walking their dog the night before her discovery recalled seeing a girl who resembled her sitting alone near the water, hugging her knees as if deep in thought. But they noticed no signs of fear, no one else nearby, and no strange activity in the area. That image of a lone girl staring into the dark waves became central to the mystery. Was she contemplating escape, waiting for someone, Or had she already accepted whatever fate awaited her? The autopsy delivered more questions. Her cause of death could not be pinpointed. No toxins, no wounds, no indications of drowning. Her body seemed simply shut down. Medical examiners considered rare medical, undetected heart issue, even stress-induced collapse, but nothing fit perfectly. The more they examined her, the more she resembled a ghost, someone who passed through the world, with barely a trace of her existence recorded anywhere. Over time, the case grew colder, drifting between agencies and generating quiet interest from amateur sleuths who tried to match her face to countless unidentified teens. Technology advanced, allowing for more refined reconstructions and deeper database searches, yet she remained nameless. Some theorized she was an undocumented immigrant, others believed she was a runaway who crossed state lines. Some even entertained ideas of an intentional disappearance, a life lived entirely off the radar. But without evidence, each theory became another wandering thread in the fabric of her story. Today, Somerton Beach holds the memory of a girl who came and went without explanation. Her resting place carries no family name, only a marker honoring someone whose identity remains locked behind silence. Her mystery endures because it speaks to something deeper, the fear that a life can vanish quietly without the world noticing. Somewhere, someone once knew her, loved her, raised her, and yet her story ends on a beach with no answers. Until the day her name is discovered, she remains one of America's most haunting reminders of the unknown. Imagine calling your parents for help on a dark rural road, walking while talking, describing the landscape around you, and then suddenly saying, "Oh, shit," before the line goes dead forever. Nobody, no struggle, no logical explanation. Brandon Swanson's final phone call has become one of the most chilling disappearances in American history, and one that still feels like it's missing a final, impossible piece. Brandon Swanson was driving home after a night out with friends, following familiar roads he had traveled since childhood. But on this particular night, he took a wrong turn, ending up near remote farmland where gravel paths looked identical in every direction. When his car slid into a shallow ditch, he wasn't alarmed. He simply called his parents, confident they would help him get back on track. They stayed on the phone as he walked, describing fences, fields, and distant lights that should have guided rescuers to him. Yet his parents drove through the area without ever spotting him. He continued walking, his voice calm and clear, never once showing fear or confusion. For nearly 50 minutes, the call stayed connected as he narrated his path through the darkness, trying to reconcile the landscape with the area he believed he was in. His father reassured him repeatedly, promising they would find him soon. There were no strange noises in the background, no hints of danger, only steady footsteps and Brandon's observations about his surroundings. Everything seemed normal until it wasn't. Then came the moment that froze the world. In the middle of a sentence, Brandon suddenly said, "Oh, shit," followed by complete silence. The line stayed active for several more minutes, but he never responded again. His parents called his name again and again, waiting for movement, breathing, anything. But the night offered nothing. When the call finally disconnected, they expected the worst but hoped for the best, thinking perhaps he dropped the phone or fell. What they didn't know was that this moment would mark the beginning of an enduring mystery. Police and volunteers searched the area for weeks, covering miles of open fields, drainage ditches, and farmland. They found Brandon's car exactly where he described it, but no trace of him anywhere else, no clothing, no phone, no footprints preserved in the soft ground. It was as if he had stepped into the darkness and evaporated. Search dogs followed his scent for a short distance before losing it abruptly, reinforcing their eerie sense that something sudden and untraceable occurred that final act. Investigators considered every possibility, from a fall into hidden terrain to a medical emergency, but none of those explanations aligned with the evidence or lack of it. There were no dangerous cliffs nearby, no aggressive wildlife, no signs he had entered water. The area was vast, but not unforgiving enough to swallow someone whole. Yet Brandon's disappearance defied standard logic, leaving only the chilling weight of the unknown. Even seasoned searchers admitted the case felt different, unsettling, incomplete. His parents never stopped searching. They returned year after year, walking the same fields, contacting new agencies, hoping advancements in technology might reveal something overlooked. They pushed for policy changes that improved how authorities handle missing adults, turning their grief into a legacy of protection for others. But personally, Closure remained elusive. Not knowing where their son went or what he encountered became a torment more haunting than any confirmed tragedy. Today, Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains one of the most haunting examples of a person vanishing mid-conversation. His final words echo through true crime history because they come with no explanation, no follow-up, no clue to what happened next. That simple, startled expression, "Oh, shit," is the last known moment of his life, suspended forever in the darkness of a rural Minnesota night. And until the day someone uncovers the truth, his story will continue to haunt America as one of its most baffling unsolved mysteries. Two sisters walked into a crowded mall on a sunny afternoon and were never seen again. No screams, no struggle, no witnesses who could agree on what they saw. Just two empty places beside a record store and a trail of contradictions that has confused investigators for nearly half a century. This is the chilling disappearance of the Lyon sisters. Catherine and Sheila Lyon were only 10 and 12 when they walked to the neighborhood shopping center, a place packed with families, teenagers, and store employees who knew their faces. It was a carefree spring day, the kind where children wandered freely without fear. They browsed shops, listened to music, and laughed their way through the mall just like countless times before. But when their mother expected them home for dinner, the seats at the table remained empty. Hours turned to panic, and panic turned into a nightmare that would stretch across decades. Witness reports flooded in, each one slightly different, creating a kaleidoscope of conflicting details that felt impossible to stitch together. Some said the girls were talking to a tall man carrying a tape recorder. Others claimed they were seen near the parking lot. A few said they left alone, heading toward home. But none of these accounts aligned cleanly, and investigators quickly realized the challenge wasn't a lack of witnesses, it was the overwhelming inconsistency of their memories. The mall had been crowded, noisy, chaotic, and the truth became buried under layers of contradictory perception. Police searched every store, every corridor, every service entrance, but the sisters had vanished without leaving a single clear trail. There were no abandoned belongings, no signs of abduction, and no surveillance cameras to fill the gaps. The absence of digital evidence as standard today felt like a curse. In the 1970s, everything depended on human recall, and human recall proved tragically unreliable. Investigators soon realized that the timeline between the girls being seen and being gone was so small, it seemed almost impossible for a kidnapper to have acted so seamlessly. For years, the case grew colder, ricocheting between detectives, generating suspects, but no solid conclusions. They chased leads across state lines, questioned men seen near playgrounds, malls, and bus stops, but nothing connected directly to the sisters. There was a constant sense that the truth was hovering just beyond reach, that someone had seen the critical moment, but didn't realize its importance. The mall that once represented community and safety became an open wound, a place where innocence disappeared without explanation. Decades later, renewed investigations brought fresh perspective. A man who matched early descriptions resurfaced as a suspect, but his statements were fragmented, inconsistent, and often self-serving. Theories expanded, suggesting the girls may have been lured by someone posing as a performer or someone pretending to interview children. Even so, no confession, no detail, no evidence emerged to fully answer what happened. The case remained a tangle of half-truths, whispers, and hollow leads that felt like chasing smoke. Family members aged, communities changed, and the mall itself transformed over time, but the void remained. The disappearance of the Lyon sisters became one of America's most heartbreaking unsolved cases, not simply because they vanished, but because they vanished in a place crowded with people yet no one saw the moment that mattered. That paradox continues to haunt investigators. How can two children disappear in plain sight? Today, the sisters' story endures as a solemn reminder of the limits of eyewitness memory and the fragility of safety. Their names are etched into the collective memory of the region, their faces preserved in age progression images that show what they might look like today. But until someone uncovers the missing piece of the timeline, the truth remains suspended in that crowded mall, somewhere between the record shop and the parking lot, where two young girls took their last known steps into the mystery that still grips America. A hotel infamous for tragedy, an elevator acting strangely, a young woman seen stepping in and out as if fleeing something no camera ever captured, and weeks later, her body found in a place no one thought to search. Eliza Lamb's final moments are one of the internet's most haunting mysteries, and one that refuses to sit quietly in the shadows. Eliza Lamb checked into the Cecil Hotel seeking adventure, independence, and a temporary escape from her daily routine. She explored the city freely, posted thoughts online, and shared her journey with the innocence of a traveler who felt safe in her curiosity. But the Cecil was no ordinary hotel. Its history was soaked in misfortune and crime, its halls whispering stories that made even seasoned travelers uneasy. Eliza, unaware of the building's dark past, became part of its most infamous chapter. Her disappearance began innocently enough: missed checkouts, unanswered calls, and a concerned family. But when the police released the elevator footage, the world froze. Eliza stepped into the elevator, pressed multiple buttons, and then behaved in ways no one could fully explain. She peeked into the hallway, stepped out cautiously, waved her arms in slow, deliberate motion, and hid briefly in the corner as if avoiding someone unseen. The elevator itself behaved strangely, doors remaining open too long, seeming to ignore her commands. The footage ignited theories as wild as they were numerous. As the days passed, hotel guests complained of low water pressure, discolored water, and a strange taste coming from the taps. Maintenance workers climbed to the rooftop, opened a massive water tank, and discovered Eliza's body floating inside. The scene was almost impossible. The tank was tall, heavy, and difficult to access. The hatch was typically sealed, and reaching it required a level of effort and determination that seemed incompatible with Eliza's physical state. There were no signs of trauma on her body, no clear cut, and no explanation for how she got into the tank. The investigation narrowed in on mental health challenges Eliza had openly struggled. Some experts argued she entered the tank during a moment of disorientation. Others insisted the logistics made that explanation implausible without help. The hotel's security flaws and unusual access points only complicated matters. Her parents, devastated, demanded accountability, but the building structure and mismanagement clouded the investigation further. Every step forward seemed to drag the case deeper into ambiguity. Internet communities exploded with speculation. Some believed she was being followed. Others said she was reacting to fear, real or imagined. A few pointed to the Cecil's dark reputation, drawing connections that blurred the lines between fact and superstition. But beneath the noise was a young woman who deserved understanding, not mythologizing. The truth seemed caught between mental health realities, building negligence, and the cold, unfeeling mechanics of a place that had swallowed too many tragedies before hers. Authorities eventually ruled her death accidental, a conclusion that satisfied few. The unanswered questions, the elevator's behavior, the tank's difficulty, the odd timing left people uneasy. The case refused to fit neatly into any explanation. Her story became a symbol of how human lives can become distorted through mystery, fear, and the internet's hunger for supernatural narrative. Today, Eliza Lamb's name lives on through documentaries, discussions, and reminders of the importance of mental health awareness. But the haunting element remains, the sense that something about her final moments doesn't fully add up. The Cecil Hotel has since been shuttered and rebranded, but the shadow of her story lingers, tied forever to that elevator, that rooftop, and a mystery that still whispers unanswered questions into the night. Two men were found lying side by side on a lonely hillside, dressed in matching formal suits, wearing lead masks over their eyes, and holding a cryptic note that seemed to reference some unknown ritual or meeting. No cause of death, no signs of struggle, no witnesses. The lead mask mystery is one of the most bizarre, unsettling cases America has ever seen. The discovery was so strange that even seasoned detectives questioned whether they were looking at a crime scene or something entirely different. Two adult men lying neatly on the grass, dressed as if for a ceremony, with heavy lead eye coverings positioned carefully over their faces. Their belongings were arranged with purpose: a notebook containing coded instruction, a bottle of water, and cash left untouched. The scene felt staged, but staged by whom, and for what purpose? No one could answer. The autopsies revealed an even more chilling truth. There were no injuries, no poison, no signs of suffocation. The bodies seemed untouched by violence. Their organs showed no abnormality, and their blood work offered no indication of substances that could explain their deaths. Toxicology results were inconclusive, leaving investigators with nothing but a void where answers should have been. It was as if the men lay down, closed their eyes behind the lead masks, and simply ceased to exist. Their notebook contained cryptic messages referring to meeting at the designated time, protection, and ingesting capsules, but no capsules were found at the scene, and witnesses reported nothing unusual prior to their deaths. The instructions were written in a way that suggested preparation for a significant event, but whether that event was scientific, spiritual, or something else entirely remained unclear. The more investigators read, the more the words seemed to spiral into mystery. Friends described the men as electronics enthusiasts fascinated by radio frequencies, energy fields, and the possibility of contacting higher beings. Some theories suggested they believed they could initiate communication with something beyond the physical world using their equipment. The lead masks, according to this speculation, were meant to shield them from powerful light or radiation during such an encounter. Others proposed they were manipulated by someone with knowledge of their beliefs, lured into a ritual they did not fully understand. Efforts to trace their movements prior to their deaths provided strange contradictions. They purchased formal clothing, visited electronics stores, and appeared calm and purposeful, as if following a well-rehearsed plan. But there were no receipts for capsules, no witnesses to conversations that clarified their intentions, and no surviving notes that explained the meaning behind their final journey. Even their families struggled to reconcile the rational men they knew with the inexplicable way they died. Investigators tried to reconstruct their final hours, imagining whether they climbed a hillside expecting revelation, salvation, or transcendence. But the peaceful positioning of their bodies suggested they were not afraid. Their eyes covered, their hands resting calmly, they appeared to be waiting for something that never came. The absence of struggle suggested trust in a process or belief that ultimately led them to a silent, unresolved end. To this day, the lead mask mystery remains a strange intersection of science, spirituality, and the unknown. No definitive explanation has emerged, and every theory leaves gaps that feel impossible to fill. The hillside where they died still draws curiosity seekers, yet the answers remain buried beneath decades of speculation. The two men left the world in a way that defies logic, and their story continues to unsettle America because it suggests that sometimes the most chilling mysteries are the ones rooted not in violence, but in belief. A small cardboard box was found in a Philadelphia forest. Inside was the body of a young boy, bruised, nameless, wrapped in a blanket. No missing child matched him. No parent stepped forward, and for decades, he became known only as the boy in the box. His identity remained hidden, as if he had been erased before he was ever found. He was discovered by chance, lying in a simple box meant for household goods, placed in a remote patch of woods where few people ever walked. The boy was between 3 and 6 years old, small, fragile, and clearly mistreated before his death. Investigators were shaken not only by his condition, but by the absence of anything that could connect him to a family, a neighborhood, or a life once lived. His clothing was missing, his hair crudely cut, and his body bore signs that he had suffered long before he died. Police circulated sketches, descriptions, and photographs to every agency they could reach, but no one recognized. Or if they did, they chose silence. His case generated widespread public attention, with thousands of leads pouring in, each one ending in disappointment. Investigators checked orphanages, hospitals, schools, and adoption records, but nothing matched the boy's appearance. The idea that a child could exist in complete anonymity haunted the nation, sparking fears about hiddenness and forgotten victims. Years passed, and theories expanded. Some believed he had been confined for most of his life, kept hidden from society until his death. Others suspected he was the victim of illegal adoption, sold or traded between households without documentation. A few suggested he was taken from a distant state, transported to Philadelphia, and discarded where no one would find him until it was too late. Each theory felt possible, but the lack of evidence prevented investigators from committing to any single explanation. The boy's burial was attended by officers who had worked his case tirelessly, men and women who felt compelled to honor a child whose life had been erased. They raised funds for a proper headstone and visited his grave regularly, determined not to let him be forgotten. Their persistence kept the case alive long after the initial investigation faded, and every few years, new technology breathed temporary hope into the search for his identity. DNA advancements eventually opened new doors. Biological material was preserved, allowing investigators to build genealogical profiles and trace distant relatives. Slowly, the web of connections tightened, leading closer to a name that had eluded them for decades. But even with this groundbreaking progress, the circumstances of his life and death remained shrouded in darkness. Identifying him answered one question, but revealed dozens more about the people who failed him. The tragedy of the boy in the box goes beyond his anonymity. It resides in the idea that a child could suffer in silence, unseen by a community, unnoticed by the systems meant to protect the vulnerable. His story represents every unanswered cry for help, every missing child who never makes national headlines, every hidden life extinguished without consequence. And though investigators now know who he was, they still seek the truth behind how he lived and why he died alone in the cold. Today, His case stands as one of America's most heartbreaking unsolved mysteries, not because his identity is unknown, but because the cruelty he endured remains unexplained. His small box became a symbol of injustice, a reminder that some mysteries linger not in the lack of information, but in the depths of human silence. Until every piece of his story is uncovered, the boy in the box will continue to occupy a place in America's collective conscience, a question that refuses to fade.